Happy Thursday again. It's only again if you were watching the Lock Rabbit live stream that I did earlier today. So if not, happy Thursday for the first time. And as always, a big thank you to Tight Bond for sponsoring this and underwriting the Thursday Q&As. Before I jump into Q's, because there are already some listed here, a couple housekeeping things. One is, I'm just going to double check. Yeah. One of the things that's interesting about being a woodworker is we create sawdust, and one might need a place to put said sawdust. Here I'm very lucky. I'm in a very rural, I'm in a town of 2,000. There are any number of places where my sawdust can go. But my friend Paul, who lives smack in a Minneapolis suburb, it's more of a struggle for him. So with that kind of struggle idea in mind, we've got a guide to ways to upcycle your sawdust. So if you scroll down just a little bit on the page, you'll see that. And if you click on that, you can get those ideas about what to do with your sawdust. And the other thing I want to do, and I'll mention this a couple times over the next hour because I'm really excited about it. A month from now, February 8th, a friend of mine, Brian Berry, who runs the company Aqua Coat, it's just what it sounds like. It's a water-based finish company. Brian is going to drive up here. He's going to be in my shop, and we're going to do that Thursday Q&A all about water-based finishes. So we'll have some stuff ready ahead of time that we are excited to show you, but also I think what's crazy cool is that I'm not a big finishing expert, so we're going to have a finishing expert here. So put that on your calendar now, and a month from now, if you've got questions about water-based finish, and that's going to include water-based stain, water-based top coats. Typical questions that people ask me is, are these water-based products as durable as solvent-based products? So we're going to hit on that whole hour is going to be about water-based finishes. So February 8th, 4 o'clock Central Time, right here. Okay, let's jump in because we have preguntas already. Mike asks, do you have an opinion on the Sorby tool for cutting, turning grooves in pepper mills for the crush grind mechanism? Wow, no, because I'm not familiar with what that is. I wonder, my impression from this would be cutting grooves. Is it a parting tool? Here's what I would recommend. My friend Daryl, the problem with social media is I know people's Instagram tags and I don't necessarily know their names. Give me a second. Daryl is a turner and very familiar with Sorby products, and he calls himself Dread, D-R-E-A-D, Knot, K-N-O-T, Woodshop, Dread Knot Woodshop. So find Daryl. I'm looking at his site, his feed on Instagram right here. So find his feed on Instagram and check that out with Daryl. Ask him what he knows about that. Like I said, Daryl does what I do. He routinely teaches turning in retail stores, at woodworking shows, and he's very familiar with Sorby product. So he's going to be more familiar about it. Okay, Robert asks, I've got a Supermax 1632 sander. The sandpaper tends to tear on the inboard side, the right end. Any thought on why too aggressive a pass, or paper over tight. So if you're not familiar with it, on what used to be Performax, then became Supermax, which is now owned by Laguna, the manner in which the paper goes on those is there's no Velcro, there's no hook and loop. The paper goes right onto an aluminum drum, and you hook it, you clamp it, grab it on one side, and on the other side there's a spring-loaded connection that once you've engaged with the paper, it takes up, it provides tension. So if it's tearing, it's interesting that it's always tearing on the one side. So my question would be, are you confident that you're cutting it the right length? So the way these things go on, I can kind of show you because I was reorganizing my sandpaper today. When you put paper on these sanders, because of the way it wraps, you cut an angle on one end, and then you cut to a specific length. So the length for my 25-inch sander is going to be different than what Robert puts on his 16-inch sander. You cut to a specific length, and then this same angle is on the other end. If it's a little bit too long, that's going to leave it hanging off the end of the drum, which makes me think it would, that could create some problems. If it's tearing, meaning it's simply tearing at the, there's a little bit of a fold where it transitions from the drum into the grip mechanism. If it's simply tearing there, then I would double check that you're cutting the angle right. So if when you cut this, or the length right, if when you cut this, I'm gonna take advantage again of my cool new camera system here. Watch this. So make sure that the paper is right, make sure that the length is right. But I would point a finger toward gripping it at a narrow part of the angle. I have an uninsulated garage where I do woodworking. I use a propane tank top heating element to heat while I'm working, but other than that, it's frigid in the Chicago winter. As a beginner, I wanted to know what my blind spots are regarding working in the cold. What precautions do I need to take regarding wood movement, finishing, etc.? I don't know what I don't know. I've got a table saw, jointer, planer, miter saw, drill press, and a few hand planes. So there's a lot going on here. There's a lot of places things could go wrong. A really long time ago in my woodworking career, I had an unheated garage that I worked in. I glued up a tabletop, so I was providing heat. I was kicking heat in there while I was working. And then when I would leave, I would turn the heat off. And it was very interesting with that glue up, the glue got chalky and the joints failed on that table almost instantly. So I suspect what really happened there is the glue froze instead of cured. So in the world of, there's a lot of things going on, like if the thing that you're building is going to end up in a house where it is consistently 68 degrees and whatever percent humidity houses are, but you're building in an environment where it's really cold, it's really dry, and you're working with solid wood all the time, you're asking for issues. When that piece you're making goes from that build environment to the house environment, it's going to expand, it's going to contract, it's going to do all sorts of weird stuff. As much as possible, you want your shop to emulate the environment in which the thing will live. So like here, this is a separate building. I humidify this building in the wintertime so that it's the same way a house is going to be for stuff I'm building in here. The other thing, I mean, finishing, most stuff doesn't want to work under 50-ish degrees. So finish, glue, I don't know, any other liquid you're going to use, they're not going to be happy, and you're just not going to get good results. You can't apply lacquer or polyurethane or anything in really, really cold temperatures. So you need to find a way, like I think what some woodworkers do is they maybe do the woodworking in the less than perfectly heated space, but they do glue ups and finishing in a better heated space, like in their house. So a little bit of Googling around the internet might help you there. But you really got to be careful with the material and then your finishing and glue products about getting cold. Paul says, hi, George. I've been trying to turn bowls with logs from a pear tree, and they came out really nice when the wood was just cut. 6 months later, the wood is cracking and harder to turn. One bowl I just turned came out nice, but a week later it cracked, and I had to fill the crack with epoxy. How long before I have to use the logs? Is there anything I can do to prolong that? Thanks. So, a couple things. My friend Paul is an avid bowl turner. I'm an avid bowl turner. We both turn green wood. We have different approaches. Paul typically turns a bowl green, leaves the wall thick. The thickness of the wall should be about 10% of its diameter. So if you're doing a 10-inch diameter bowl, you would leave a wall thickness of 1. Then that rough turn bowl, which at this point is still wet wood, goes into a paper bag, maybe with some shavings, and that gets just set aside and allowed to dry. In that condition, it's going to dry, it's going to distort, it's going to go egg-shaped. Then it goes back on the lathe, he finishes the turning. For me, I like to turn my green wood start to finish in one fell swoop. So part of the key to that is thin walls. If you leave a significant wall, if you leave the walls real thick, as it dries, it's going to be more prone to cracking. So in my bowl turning world, I could say probably everything. I'm just looking for some bowls here. Come here. That's box elder. And that was turned green, and I can tell it's turned green by looking at the top because it's no longer round; it's gone egg shape. So I turned that 10 years ago, March 6, 2013. And there are some tiny little cracks in it, but nothing that would make me say like, "Oh, I can't give that bowl to somebody. I can't use that bowl." So again, the key to that is. This wall is down to about a 1/4 inch wall thickness. So thin walls, and then you got to be really careful around the pith of the tree, which is right there. That's that bullseye. So if this was the bottom of the bowl, right in the middle of that pith, it would almost certainly crack across the bottom because the pith is still intact all the way through the piece, all the way through the bowl. In this case, I want the pith to be high up so that on the inside of the bowl, I've taken away most of the pith. There's a lot of tension right there. And if that pith is intact all the way across, because of that tension, you're going to be prone to getting some bigger cracks. I'm just looking to see any other examples. This one's maple, also turned green, and maybe you can tell better. Can you see how egg-shaped that is? It's quite a bit longer in this direction than it is in this direction. And again, some tiny cracks in there, but nothing like that's character. Nothing that would make me look at that and say like, oh, I can't use that. So the other thing you can do, and I've talked about this product a lot, so hang tight. I'm coming right back. I actually know where it is. Hang on, hang on, hang on. This stuff, other camera. So as the wood dries, the wood cells don't shrink and give you that crackage problem. I've had really, really good luck with Pentacryl stabilizing log cookies and bowl blanks as well. Joe says, I have your video on sharpening wood lathe tools. Is it really important to do the final sharpening, or can I just get by with running them past the fine wheel on my grinder? So, I don't know when I've done a lot of sharpening videos, so I don't know, Joe, which the final sharpening is. It could be, like I know on gouges, I take the name is escaping me, a really small honing tool, and I go inside the gouge, slipstone. I use a slipstone inside the gouge to knock down any burr that's sharpening kicked up. I think that's important. If you're scraping, if your technique for turning is scraping, taking that burr off is not that important. If your turning technique is shearing, eliminating that burr is really, really important. So if that's what I showed in the video, it's important if you're shearing. Otherwise, elucidate me, Joe. If I'm missing something there about that step, let me know. Okay, so Max just let me know when we cut to the second camera, the audio cuts out. So I won't talk anymore when the second camera's on. Dave says he's getting an echo on the audio. Anybody else? Bueller? Henry asks, is that a new bench you're sitting at? So yeah, this is, I'm going to show you more about this in a little bit. But yeah, it's a new bench, and there's a lot going on here, so I'll show you that in a second. Gary says, I'm having problems with end grain cutting boards. I set up a leveling jig to fly cut the top to smooth it. The result was not good. The end grain was torn and is very rough. Second and third try. The first worked like a charm. Second and third, not so good. The first was teak and maple. Second was maple and walnut. Third was maple, walnut, and cherry. So what could happen is that you were really, the first work was really hard on your router bit. So teak is a very, very, very abrasive material. It's got a lot of silica in it. So it could be as simple as when you machine the teak on the first cutting board, which went okay, the bit still had a good edge on it. And then when you went to the other cutting boards, the bit had dulled. So a good approach for this, like, are my cutting tools dull? Let me grab a router bit. So with any cutting tool, if you want to know if the cutting edge here is still okie and dokie, if you take a corner of it and you drag it across a thumbnail, and I'm avoiding the other camera because of the audio issue. If you drag it across a nail, it should very easily score the surface of a fingernail. So for me, just barely making contact, when I do this, it's etching lines on my thumbnail. That shows me that cutter is still sharp. And it would be the same if I chose to do that long edge. It's almost like using a wood scraper on my thumbnail. It's scraping, very easily scraping my thumbnail. So I would do that test on your router bit and see if it's still sharp. But since that first cut was in teak, that would be my guess, is that you simply have a dull router bit. Okay. Paul says, how long can a log sit outside and still be used to turn on the lathe? Is there anything I can do to keep the wood green longer? I've had stuff sit outside for a really long time, like outside in the shade. So you need to do a couple of preemptive things. One is paint. I'm just thinking if I have anything in here. I don't think I do. Paint the end grain. So while it's still in log form, and I just used like whatever latex paint I have left from a previous project, I use that. So paint the end grain to seal it. If the bark is on, leave the bark on, set it someplace where, like inside an unheated garage is a pretty perfect spot. You don't want the log just sitting in the sun where it's going to get baked, or on a concrete driveway where it's going to get baked. So put it in the shade, put it someplace where it's not going to get overheated. And I've had stuff where I'll intentionally leave the log extra long, and even 6 months later, if I cut the ends off, there might be some checking on the ends. But if I cut the ends off, the stuff in the middle is still very, very, very green. All right, so Joe clarified a little bit. I was switching to a honing stone or sandpaper. I understand the need to get rid of a burr, scraping and gouging mainly, and then using the cutting tool. So, yeah, I think that last honing step, depending on, so today I'm sharpening on a CBN wheel. And it is, I'm pretty sure it's 600 grit. So on like my bowl gouge, I'll hit the bevel, the side of the gouge, and then I'll use a slipstone to clean up the inside, and that's it. I'm done. Then I'm back to the lathe. So again, depending on where, how long ago I shot that video that Joe's talking about, it sounds like I still had a different approach. Maybe it was a aluminum oxide wheel on a low RPM grinder, in which case I was going to a finer step after that to put a little better edge on it. Bill says, saw part of the show earlier, just like to know if you have used the miter lock router bit and your thoughts. Yeah, so I've done lock miters a bunch, and it's when I teach router table techniques here or whatever, in a retail store or a woodworking club, whatever, it's one of the more popular topics that people like to see because lock miter bits are difficult to set up. So what I like about the cut, once you get it right, is it's much the same as what we got out of the drawer lock today, the lock rabbit, which is a lot of surface area, a good interlock, so you have a great mechanical grab between the parts, and then the real benefit to it is you end in a miter. So the lock rabbit, the lock rabbit we did earlier leaves end grain showing. A lock miter does not leave any end grain showing. But the setup is a whole lot fussier than what I did earlier on that lock rabbit today. So I've used it. It's not something I use real often. I wouldn't ever use it on a drawer, but I've used it a lot on just decorative boxes, you know, like a jewelry box or a keepsake box. And then for some reason, yeah, the question about the Chicago shop popped up again. So I don't know if that's the interwebs are being weird. I answered that question at the beginning when I first got started. All right, let me show you a little bit about this bench. So Henry astutely noticed that I'm sitting in a new bench. My big 4x8 workbench has a new home. And here's what's going on here. I did a project video that you will see in the not too distant future. I'm going to roll this back a little, and then I'm going to do this. So here's what's going on. The bench is a Craig bench, and obviously, and this style of workbench, this style meaning steel base, wooden top, this is not, you know, this is a pretty common approach. And there's a lot of cool stuff going on here. It assembles easily. You can have a bench in your shop in no time. The tops are available in a bunch of different configurations, different sizes, with holes, without holes. But my problem with this is that it's a great bench, but what a waste of space. So the project I did was to do this cabinet assembly that fits into the steel frame. So the cabinet assembly is this. It's got pull-out trays on 24-inch full extension slides. And then I don't think the casters are locked. Yep. And then on this end, there's a flip-up shelf. So if you're working here and you just need another spot to put stuff, you can use that. And then on this end, there's another cabinet. So that's about a little over 4 inches deep. So like glue bottles, aerosol cans, that kind of stuff. And then on the front, there's little PVC pipes here, pencils, paint brushes, glue brushes. And then the whole thing is made out of 3/4 inch MDF, including the back of the cabinet. So here, I haven't finished this yet. There's all sorts of real estate here. And because it's 3/4 stock, you can put screws in it. So you could hang clamps here. You could hang stuff here. I don't know. There's a lot of space here for additional storage. So don't get after me too soon asking for where is the video. It'll be, I'm going to say, look for that in a couple weeks or so. What is this, January something? January 11th. Give us until like the end of the month to get that, get the edits done on it and get that posted. But it was very fun and it was challenging. I was very proud of the result. It took a lot of thinking to get it figured out as to what's it going to take to get that to fit. The steel frame has all been put together. How do you get the cabinet in there? And so there was a lot going on there. So I'm very proud of the project. But give us, like I said, give us until like the end of the month to get everything done on that. There'll be a printable plan that goes with it, a full cut list. Paul says, I seem to be going through bandsaw blades. A new 3/16 10 TPI broke my first time using it. My 1/4 inch 6 TPI seemed to dull halfway through cutting a log on a 14-inch jet. The gauge on it doesn't seem to move when I try to tighten or loosen. Is there a way to set how tight it should be? So, yeah, so let's do... you'll see my messy shop in the background, but let's do a little bit of a move here. getting you to my bandsaw. So I need to unplug. And I currently, that's a 1/2-inch blade in this Laguna right now. But with about 6 inches of blade exposed, when I do this, I'm looking for about an 1/8 inch of deflection. Now, this is pretty subjective. I recognize that if I push harder, I can get it to go more than an 1/8. If I get this to the full 13 inch, that's also going to affect it. So again, somewhere around 6 inches, a little bit of a push, 1/8 inch of deflection. What I like better is when you're cutting, and I came to the show without a pencil. Oh, now I've got one. So on a piece of scrap, put a line, and it's best if that's in a little bit of a curve. And then try following the line. And what'll happen if the blade does not have enough tension on it, when you push on the front of it, trying to follow a pencil line, the blade has a tendency to deflect. And it makes it impossible to stay on the pencil line. So cut a little bit, see how it is to stay on the line, cut a little bit more, cut a little bit more. And the benefit to a curve is it's forcing you to kind of work your way through that shape. It's a better test. Over-tensioned, which means you're about to break the blade, especially at 3/16. A good indication of that is the blade breaks. There's no, it's better to start low and dial the tension up until it's right than to start too high and then very, very quickly get a broken blade. So one test is pressing on the blade. Another one that's a better test is to make a cut and see with a sharp blade, can I in fact stay on the line and take that wander out of it by increasing the tension just a little bit. Because you don't want to have a tension deficit. See what I did there? So while I'm checking on questions, don't forget, a month from now, the live stream that we do February 8th is going to be, is going to be all about water-based finishes. So Brian Berry from Aquacoat is going to be here in the shop with me. We're going to have some stuff set up ahead of time that we can show you in the world of educating about water-based finishes. And then from there, we're going to just have open Q&A for an hour about water-based stain, water-based top coat, kind of all things water-based. So it'll be a really cool hour. Mike asks, where's the new home for the big old workbench? So my friend Charlie, you've seen him on videos with me. He and I did the motorcycle trip together a couple years ago to the Blue Ridge Parkway. Anyway, it's going to end up in a very, very good home in Charlie's shop. So it worked out, the whole thing worked out really, really well. And Amanda is either encouraging or discouraging me from my puns. I can't quite tell by her comment. All right, I'm scrolling. All right, well, this is an unusual scenario. A lot of people are watching and I'm out of questions and it's only 4:30. So I'm going to tap dance a little bit. I'll show you a huge project that I'm working on, and then we'll see what happens here. So in this part of the shop, I'm questioning my sanity a little bit here. This is a monster big pile of ash. This is going to become 2 workbench tops. So Charlie, who I was just talking about, has got a sawmill and a kiln. So this ash got cut up, I don't remember when. Cut it on the sawmill, then he put it in his kiln. So I brought this in here about a week ago. So slabs, 2 inches thick, and some were 28, 30 inches wide. Straight lined one edge with a circ saw, and then I ripped them into what we're looking at here, which is our 2-inch by 3-inch by like 64-inch pieces. The ends are going to get cut because I don't want that long a bench top when I'm done. So what I did is, this is something I've talked to you guys about a lot. In fact, we were just talking about it with that Chicago shop. Letting stuff acclimate. So this went from Charlie's kiln to my shop. So I let the slabs, I stickered the slabs, I think it was 8 slabs. I stickered the slabs and I let them sit in my space for about 4 days, 5 days. Then I straight lined the edge. I pushed all these through the table saw to get the pile that we have in front of me now, and I stickered them again, and I'm letting them sit. Because one of the things, Charlie's good with the kiln, but drying thicker material is more difficult than drying 8-quarter, which is what we have, is more difficult than drying 4-quarter. So I want to make sure that once I start machining this stuff, it doesn't go weird. So now they've been sitting in this state about another 4 days or so. So probably tomorrow I'm going to start machining them, which is face joint one face. And then once I have a face jointed, then I'll send them through the planer to hit the other face. And then I'll start gluing the bench tops together. So it's going to be, if I live through it, it's going to be very cool. And ash, of course, is it's a wonderful wood for a workbench top. So it'll be neat. Maybe the next time we're all together, I'll have these done. Hopefully I will. But it's going to be a very big project. But I'm excited about it. And the way I'm going to do this, I've got an 18-inch planer and a 25-inch drum sander. The finished benches are going to be wider than that. So I'll glue them together in subsections, then send them through the planer and the drum sander, and then do one final glue up to get my final width. So it'll be cool. It'll be interesting. And it'll be a really good workout because, you can never have enough of that. All right, let's check on not running over my cord. Okay, question here. I'm absolutely new to woodworking, started turning, doing okay. Watched a 10-minute video, changed my game a little. What do you recommend for new folks? So with turning, we have a lot of turning. I'm an avid turner. So we have a lot of turning videos on WWGOA. So I would just, on the page you're on, WWGOA.com, at the very top, there's a search window. And type into that search window lathe turning. And there's everything from building a lathe station to sharpening lathe chisels, like we talked about earlier, to spindle techniques, bowl techniques. So that's a good way to go. Henry asks, how is the canoe? It's embarrassingly not any more done than it was 2 years ago. So part of what got in the way of that, if you're not aware of it, I'm building a cedar strip canoe. The outside has been epoxied. The inside needs to be sanded and epoxied, and then I'm ready for seats and the gunnels and breast hooks and all of that stuff. So like mid-COVID, I did a video project where I bought a camper, I bought a bumper pull camper, and I rehabbed the camper. So the woodworking thing I do for you was my day job. My side hustle was working on that camper. So I put the canoe into storage because I knew it would distract me from getting the camper done. The camper is now done, and that video series is complete. What I need to do, part of the reorganizing I'm in the middle of right now, is to make space to get the canoe back in here, because if it's here in front of me, I'll pick away at it. If it's in that storage unit 200 feet from my shop, going over there to get it, bringing it here on a weekend to work on it, and then putting it back is never going to happen. So it's been a long, slow process. A number of summers have gone by since I got it, and I keep saying, this is going to be the summer, I'm going to get it on water before the water freezes. And I have missed that window a bunch of times. So thanks for asking. It's been a really slow, really slow process. Lee says, have you done a guide on setting up a router table? I have not. I'm not sure what setup would be. I'd have to stew on that. Like setting up a miter saw, setting up a table saw, makes sense to me. I'm a heavy router table user, so we've got a lot of video content on using a router table and joinery on a router table, but from a setup perspective, I'm not sure what that would entail. Tracy's looking for help with moisture meters. I have 3, a cheap pinned meter, a little more expensive pinless, and even more expensive pinless. Different readings on all 3, don't know what to trust. What should I spend on a reliable meter and what make? So the one I use the most is a Lignamat. And it was laying there on the ash because I'm using it to monitor the ash. So this is pinless. This is a Ligno Scanner SD. I've had this for a very long time. I think if I remember correctly, it scans to 3/4 of an inch. So like when those slabs were still in their 2-inch form, I could scan from a face, and get a pretty good call, pretty good read on what the moisture content of that whole slab was. So, it's not something I've tool tested. I can't say this is the best one in the marketplace or this other one is or whatever. Just experientially, this Ligno Scanner SD has been a very good one for me. Bill says you're planning to do a video on the miter lock joint. Yeah, I mean, it's already done. So let me, what I'm doing, I'm just reopening WWGOA.com. Go into the search window, lock miter. And the first thing that comes up is cutting a lock miter joint. So anytime you're wondering boy, has George ever done this? We've been doing videos since 2007. There's 16 years worth of video content on WWGOA.com. That's pretty incredible. I guess 17 years now. October of 2007 was the first video shoot. So anytime you're wondering, use that search window, put the topic in there, and see what happens. So there you go. It's already, there you go, Bill. It's already there. William says that's a lot of lumber. How big is the tabletop you want to build? Well, I'm doing 2, and they're going to end up being probably 36 by 50 each, as close to 2 inches thick as I can stay. Tom says, I'm doing a large armoire. I have nightmares about the glue up of the case. Any tips to help? Anything, if you can do it in sections, that's a great way to go. Subsections. And then additionally, be aware of tight bond extend, just what it sounds like. Gives you more working time. So with that, it's going to give you more time to manipulate the clamps, make sure it's square. And I would, man, and our armoires are big. I work alone all the time, but when you run into something like that, that's a great time to phone a friend and get another pair of hands to spread glue, handle clamps, handle parts. Read tape measures to check for square. But that tight bond extend is going to help you not sweat so much. Richard says, I have a hard time routing grooves in a panel door frame on a router table. I run the first groove. Then if I have to widen it, I move to backside where it shoots the board out. If I go to the other side, if it bump near the backside, same result. So I don't know if you're doing 2 passes on a router table to make grooves or dados, the sequence in which you make your passes is really, really critical. So give me 1 second. I know we've covered this with a handheld router and a fence. Hang on, I'm reading a description. So what happens is, if you do, let's say you want a 3/4 inch groove when you're done. If you do that with a 1/2 inch bit, and then you move the fence toward the cutter to do the next pass, you're climb cutting. And the cutting edge of the router bit is going to grab that board and shoot it. So you need to control your passes so that you do the first pass. I'm just thinking this through as I go. And then you feeding right to left, you move the fence away to do the widening pass. So it sounds to me like that's your problem, is that you're taking that second pass on the wrong side of the cut. That's leading to it being a climb cut, and that's what's making it grab the board. Amanda, who was making fun of my puns, so maybe I won't answer her question, says, I need to build a headboard for a queen size bed. Needs to be quite deep because it will sit partially in front of a window and the stool. The goal is for the headboard to cover the stool so my fiance doesn't hit his head on the corner of the stool. I am thinking to make it have a storage cabinet to make use of the depth. For the build, would it make sense to basically build a cabinet carcass, then use the actual carcass to transfer the measurements from the wall and window stool to the carcass? Yeah, I would basically build a cabinet and then fit it to that. And it took me a really long time, like years and years and years, to go to the world of electronic drafting, meaning SketchUp. I did a dresser. It was in this shop, so it was in the last 10 years. But I did a 5-drawer dresser And one of the things I really wanted on that was to make sure I had the proportions on the drawers right. That was the first time I ever used SketchUp, and I have never gone back to not using SketchUp. So there's going to be a learning curve. It's going to delay the start on your project, but you can use SketchUp online for free. There are a lot of tutorials out there, and I would entertain learning some SketchUp basics and then trying to draw what you're building in SketchUp. And then it's basically, what I really like about SketchUp is you draw the way you build. You create an end, you put dados and rabbits in it, you copy that to become the other end, then you do a top and a bottom. If you want adjustable shelf holes, you can do that. So you're cutting all the joints in SketchUp by creating those parts. So on the cut list side, which is Amanda's other comment, it really nails down the cut list size, because if they work on the computer, you have real dimensions that show you in space, in 3D, what they're going to look like. So recognizing that, you'll have to get through the learning curve to get on top of SketchUp in order to then start your project. I think it's worth the commitment to do that. I'm always antsy. I mean, I'm generally behind on stuff, so I'm always antsy, project. But taking the time to get the hang of SketchUp was worth doing. And now that it's a bunch of years later and I'm better versed in it, now I use it all the time. Gary says, have you built guitars? If so, from scratch or a kit? So yeah, I've probably built 12 or 15 kit guitars. The kit I've used the most is US guitar kit. The first guitar I played was a guitar I built. I've got a Stu Mac guitar here, dovetailed neck. I'd like to say I'm in the middle of that, but it's like the canoe. Started, stop, and you can't really do that with a guitar. So the guitar kit from Stu Mac is resting comfortably until I'm ready to, like, this week I am building the guitar start to finish. So yeah, I've done a bunch of that. John says, what are the dimensions of your shop? It's 3,200 square feet. It is the building is 40 by 80. So what I know is that from that door to that end is 23 yards. And the reason I know that is my fiance and I shoot archery in here, and we can get a 23-yard shot at the target right there from that doorway. Larry says, whoops, I bumped the mic. Do you have recommendations, flattening sled and rails, and which router to use? So there are a couple approaches to this you can take. I have got a tote sled mill, TOT SLED. I like it a lot. The dust collection on it is really, really, really good, and that's huge. Slab flattening is incredibly messy. So if you want to go commercial, that tote sled is a great way to go. We've also got stuff on the site. I don't know, right before Christmas, I think, we did the cutting board challenge. Part of that was there's a video about making a slab flattening sled shop made. So the scale for that is for cutting boards, but there's no reason why you can't blow that scale up and do slabs the exact same way. My first slab mill, it's shown in my book, my book about live edge slabs. The shop made slab mill is in there with all the dimensions and directions about how to make it. So the downside of that is it doesn't have dust collection. So that's why I went to the tote sled subsequently. And for a video, I have a 3.5 horse Milwaukee, I think, in that mill, in a 2-inch diameter bit. Bill asks, you're going to use threaded rod on the workbench to hold it together when gluing up. No, I'm just going to glue it up. So I'm going to do, like I said, like a 12-inch section, a 12-inch section, a 12-inch section. I can easily clamp that. And then in the end, when those are ready, I just have 2 seams to clamp at that point. So it should be relatively easy peasy. Paul says, I remember you showing a video on aligning the bandsaw blade with the miter slot, but I can't find it. I would not in my living memory have aligned a bandsaw blade with a miter gauge slot, because it's not like a table saw. If this is like I'm going to rip stuff on the bandsaw kind of thing, it's not like a table saw, which I'm pointing to, where because of the drift in the blade, you really can't get a bandsaw blade parallel to a miter gauge slot. So I don't think that was me, Paul. That was maybe somebody else. I'm contemplating getting a table saw. Any recommendations? I've got a saw stop, and it's, I know that in the marketplace they're expensive. It's very difficult for me to not just say save your pennies and get a saw stop. They're great table saws, and they have brake technology. So it's not solely about the brake technology. It's about the fact that they're really good table saws, and that protection you get using the saw by having the brake is really, really good. If that technology was available on a router table and a bandsaw and a miter saw and a jointer and a whatever, I'd be saying get that brand miter saw because it has brake technology. Get that brand router table because it has brake technology, because it's a wonderful protective device. Ron says, on your router table, I noticed a thumb lift for the router. So I have a is it new technology? So it's not that woodpecker lift I've had for a really long time. And the way that works is, what I did off camera before we started was, there's a rod that goes into the lift, and you use that to make gross adjustments to get close. Then you remove that, and then there's like a hand wheel kind of built into the plate, and you turn that with your finger to make small changes up and down. But yeah, that's been Woodpecker's thing for a really long time, and I've probably had that lift for 8 years. All right, folks. Well, that seems to be the end of the preguntas hoy. So thanks for watching. Don't forget a couple things. As always, thanks to Tight Bond, and don't forget to grab that upcycling sawdust guide, which is just a little bit below where we are right now on the page. Then also don't forget, a month from now-ish, February 8th, 4 o'clock Central Time, nothing but water-based finishes. That's all we're going to talk about for the hour, is water-based finishes. It's going to be really good. We're going to have an expert here who actually knows what they're talking about, unlike me. So I will see you then. Max, you can check us out.